After Effects allows you to reference another layer's transparency or pixel brightness to control what is visible. A layer that controls another layer's visibility in this way is called a track matte, and we'll examine some of that here in this movie. So here in this example, I've got a text layer that has its own built-in transparency. Everything inside the letters is opaque. Everything outside is transparent. On top of that, I have a gradient which has transparency as well. If I scale this down, you see that everything outside the box is transparent. Everything inside is opaque. So we can use this information to create what's called a track matte. Track mattes work in pairs. The layer that's going to be doing the borrowing of information, the borrowing of transparency or pixel brightness information, is on the bottom, and the layer that is providing that information is on top, and that's the track matte. So if you don't already have it enabled, go ahead and click on this button here, and that will toggle the track matte column. And you'll notice that if we select layer 2 and go down to alpha matte, it's going to reference layer 1's alpha channel. And you're not seeing any difference until we start to scale this layer 1 down. Because layer 1 is 100% opaque in the middle, we're not seeing any effect onto the letters VFX until we come past the portion that has transparency. So layer 1, again, has transparency outside the bounds of this box, and we're using that to cut out of layer 2. And that's using the alpha channel. So that's one kind of track matte. The other track matte is using the luminance. Everything that is white will be opaque. Everything that's black will be transparent. And we get a difference in the effect when we change this over to Luma Matte. And you'll see that gradient does play a part in how the transparency of layer 2 is affected. So knowing that, let's see how we can use that for a visual effect. In this composition, I've got a background plate here. I'm going to increase the exposure here for this composition window temporarily. So we can see that this shot, layer 1, has a paper airplane floating in between these two bladeless fans. And we're trying to create an effect that suggests that these two bladeless fans are actually holding up this paper airplane, when in reality, it's being held up by these two strings. So let's zoom in a little bit, and you'll see that the paper airplane has two strings coming out from the back right there. And as we go towards the top, you'll see that the strings are present in this area as well. So our trick is to get rid of the strings. Now, there's a number of ways to do this, of course. This way is going to involve creating a clean plate. And I did that here on layer 4. The creation of this is beyond the scope of this movie. However, all I simply did was Photoshop together 3 stills of this background in the center and animated that along with the movement of the fan in the center. So the trick here is to then reintroduce the paper airplane. So let's move over to our start file. Let's go ahead and zoom this back out. And let's rename this reference file to airplane. Go ahead and create another layer, a duplicate layer of that, and create this as a Luma matte. I'm going to select layer 1 and solo that. And next what I'll do is cycle through the individual red, green, and blue channels that comprise this entire image. And as I do, you'll see that there's all the red information, there's all the green information for this image, and the blue information. The blue, by far, has the most contrast between the paper airplane and the background compared to the red and the green. So I'm going to use that information and amplify this high contrast area to create a high contrast matte. So with layer 1 selected, let's go ahead and move to our effects and presets and type in calculations. And this is an effect that will basically take layer 1 and composite it on top of itself by way of a blending mode. And we can increase the contrast here. Again, we're looking for that blue channel. So here for this first input, we're going to steal layer 1's blue channel. And for the second source, we're referencing layer 1 again, and we're going to steal its blue channel. And we're going to take those two blue layers and blend them together by way of an overlay blend mode. And this is going to increase our contrast. And of course, nothing's really different about this until we take that second layer opacity and bump it up to 100%. And now you see that we have much more contrast here than when we had originally with just our blue layer alone. There's our blue layer alone. Let's go ahead and increase the exposure again. There's our blue layer alone, and when it's composited on top of itself through an overlay, we increase that contrast. We are still seeing some remnants of the strings, so let's go ahead and add in another effect called levels. And we'll add that underneath the calculations. And what this is going to do is just accentuate further what we have feeding in from this calculations effect. So all we need to do is just nudge this input black just a little bit by like 5 or maybe 10. And you'll see that with it off, we have a little bit of black still creeping out. And when we increase the contrast further with levels, we've now crushed all the blacks that were near black to complete black. And then we've also taken away the strings along with it. And so the end result here is a really high contrast image that we can use as a luma matte for the layer beneath it. So let's go ahead and select layer 2, and we'll tell layer 2 to reference layer 1 as a luma matte. And let's go ahead and bring this exposure down to 0, reset that. And instantaneously, you see that we have transparency from our airplane, and it's revealing the clean background plate. And by doing so, we've in effect gotten rid of the strings and show our clean background plate there. So let's go ahead and turn off the luma matte. There's our strings by themselves. And with our luma matte, we've gotten rid of it and recomposited our airplane, or reinserted our airplane back into our shot. Looks like we're getting a little bit of leftover here. Let's go ahead and take that airplane layer and introduce a rectangle tool to create a mask for that. And we'll invert that so that we subtract and take that bit of that light stand. And so by simply borrowing the brightness of another layer, we can create transparency onto our main layer through the use of track mattes.